You're listening to The Secrets of Star Trek, where we discuss the hidden layers and deeper meanings found in all the Star Trek TV series, movies, and more. And today we're discussing the Deep Space Nine episode, Homefront. I'm Dom Bettinelli, and joining me today on the panel are Jimmy Aiken. Hey, Jimmy.
Howdy, Dom.
And Father Jason Tyler. Hey, Father.
Hello.
Folks, be sure to stick around to the end of the episode. We have more of your excellent listener feedback we want to share with you and respond to. Be sure to get your very own Secrets of Star Trek t-shirt or other merchandise by visiting our merchandise shop at sqpn.com/merch. And so let's get right into it. Jimmy, can you give us a recap of what happens in Homefront?
This week, the wormhole is acting up by opening and closing randomly, and nobody knows why. Then there's a bombing on Earth that's caused by the changelings, and Sisko and Odo are summoned to Earth to consult about the situation. Sisko is made acting head of Earth security by the authority of Admiral Layton, who recommended him for the job on DS9. One of the things Layton wants to do is use Sisko and Odo's expertise on how to detect changelings. So they propose some simple measures like blood tests and phaser sweeps. But Federation President Jerish Inyo doesn't want to do those things, and we get a parable about the need to balance security measures with individual rights. Inyo is convinced eventually to let the basic security measures go into effect, but Sisko begins to think his father is a changeling when he resists having a standard blood draw to prove he's a human. Turns out that Sisko's father isn't a changeling, he's just an unreasonably stubborn old man. But then Odo discovers that a man who seems to be Admiral Layton is really a changeling impersonating him. Things go from bad to worse when there is a total planetary blackout, apparently caused by the changelings. There may also be a Jem'Hadar fleet heading to Earth because of the way the wormhole was acting up, and the real Admiral Layton and Sisko convinced the president to declare a state of emergency and introduce martial law. The episode ends with Starfleet soldiers beaming onto city streets. The end.
The end of part one of two parts. That's we'll get, and we'll discuss.
No. This just reset Federation continuity. Everything's under martial law now.
That's right. Father, what'd you think of this one?
I like this. I think it's an interesting look at the question of civil rights versus security. It has a good setup for the payoff that we'll see in the next episode. There are certainly hints in this one of what's to come, but it's not totally as obvious as some of the other turnarounds that maybe we've had at different times. I especially like the fact that Sisko has some real security concerns of his own, and those are often justified concerns. So this is not simply a good captain versus bad admiral story that we had, a few different times in Next Generation, I think. And I also like seeing Nog, at the Academy, and I liked hearing that his experience was not purely easy. And so it's, one of the many ways this series is good about having our heroes that also have various flaws at different points. And we see that in Nog, not a moral flaw, but just, he's not the most excellent, absolute best cadet that's ever been, adjusting completely to the Academy. So overall, an episode I really liked.
Good. Jimmy, how about you?
I think it's an okay episode. It's fine. On balance, I like it. It's basically Babylon 5's version of 7 Days in May. I don't know if y'all have ever seen that movie. It was a movie that came out it was filmed at least during John F. Kennedy's early time in the White House. It's about a military coup taking place in the United States, where there's a general named, what is it? I forget his he's got the name Mattoon in there. It's like George Mattoon something, who is convinced that the president is weak on communism and is going to get us into a nuclear war. And so he stages he's a too pacifist as a president, and he stages a coup, or tries to stage a coup, to take over and save the nation. And those are the same basic themes we have playing out here, where you've got a determined admiral who is convinced that the president is too soft on the threat that is posed to the nation, or to the planet, to the Federation, by its major enemy, and is willing, we'll find out next episode, is willing to take matters into his own hands in order to proceed the way that he thinks things need to be done to ensure safety. So we've basically watched a Starfleet version of that. Oh, Kennedy was so actually concerned about there being a coup in his own presidency because he had failed to fully support the Bay of Pigs the way that a lot of advisors wanted him to. And he also had, negotiated an ending that the public wasn't even fully aware of, but he had negotiated an ending to the Cuban Missile Crisis in '62 that he thought that there was a real possibility that others in the U.S. In the military intelligence community might have staged a coup against him because they thought he was too soft on communism. Instead, they just killed him. Or arguably that's what happened. But he actually let them film out in front of the White House. There's a scene at the opening of the movie where there's this big anti-presidential demonstration, and he let them film it right out in front of the White House to kind of convey to the public, this is a real danger to our nation at this time. So it's interesting seeing these themes worked over in a Star Trek context. We also have, once again, Star Trek is tending to mirror Babylon 5, which was one of the criticisms that Joe Michael Straczynski, the creator of Babylon 5, had. He has proposed that even though there's not a lot of direct copying, that the officials in charge of the studio that made Star Trek Deep Space Nine had previously had Babylon 5 pitched to them, and there are a large number of basic similarities between the two series. And he thinks, and he's commented on how we were doing stuff that then 2 years later Babylon 5 would pick up and do their version of exactly the same thing. Yeah. And there's actually an intersection between this pair of episodes and Babylon 5, because over on Babylon 5, they introduced a character named General Haig, who was the superior of the station commander on the captain of Babylon 5, and General Haig was leading a rebellion against Earth government. And General Haig was played by Robert Foxworth. And then over here on DS9, they introduce Admiral Layton, who is played by Robert Foxworth, who is playing an admiral leading a coup against EarthGov. And and it caused a problem because they had scheduled a reappearance of General Haig on Babylon 5, and when they got word, when they tried to book Robert Foxworth for the shoot, he said, sorry, I'm being Admiral Layton over on DS9. So they couldn't have the actor whose part they had previously set up, and so they just announced that he died in a space battle. But the difference is over on Babylon 5, General Haig was a good guy, and Admiral Layton ends up being a bad guy. So, so Robert Foxworth switched from his good guy part to get the higher paying, higher publicity bad guy part.
You can see how the people would be confused by Babylon 5 and Deep Space Nine, even in the fact that Jimmy several times used Babylon 5 instead of Deep Space Nine in your explanation.
I might have, yeah.
Yeah, it's a close thing. If folks want to hear more about the comparison between Deep Space Nine and Babylon 5, you can go way back to our episode 61, where you and Father Corey discussed it, the comparison, the differences and similarities between the two shows. And some of the history that you mentioned. So I like this one. I like this two-parter. I find the multi-layer plot. I like the fact that we kind of switch things up, and maybe the real villain isn't the villain that they're setting us up to see in the first episode. The second episode we'll see that it's actually a plot. Such
a Babylon 5 thing to do.
Right. And so the other thing is, I remember watching this going, why is Nog so prominent in this? Why are we spending so much time talking to Nog at the Academy and wanting to get into Red Squad and all this other stuff? And And again, that becomes a bigger part of the resolution in part 2. So some of these things, it's really a two-part that you have to watch in conjunction in order to understand why they're setting things up the way they are in the first part.
It's also paying off, the fact that they set up Nog to go to the academy with Sisko, so it's natural for them to check in on that relationship. Mm-hmm. But you're touching on one thing that struck me about this episode, which is it's actually pretty slow moving. It's a lot of character moments that are strung together because they're filling out this first hour. All the real payoff is in part 2. Mm-hmm. So there's really not a lot of forward plot movement. The only thing that happens in this episode is Sisko and Odo come to Earth, and there's a blackout, and they get the president to introduce martial law.
Right.
And that's the plot contribution of this episode, but it's very minimal. The rest of it is character development and building and ramping up and stuff, but it's not really directly engaging the plot as much. It's very well done, though. Mm-hmm. I think the first time I watched it, I didn't notice that. Yeah. But rewatching it for critiquing it became clear to me this is pretty thin actually on the plot.
Yeah. One other significant thing I would add is the revelation at one point that a changeling is impersonating Admiral Layton, at one time, because that gives that idea that this isn't just paranoia. This isn't just, over concern about security, that there really are some changelings on Earth and they really can impersonate a Starfleet admiral, up to a certain point. So.
We have a whole arc of 8 episodes where where it's all about the changeling infiltration.
Yeah.
Once you know that's a changeling impersonating Admiral Layton, though, it's really obvious on the rewatch.
Sure.
Because Odo has, the way it happens is Odo is in the form of a seagull, and he flaps down into the park at Starfleet headquarters and turns back into his humanoid form. And Commander Benteen and Admiral Layton are walking around, and they see him do this. And Commander Benteen, who is Layton's adjutant, is really impressed, and she says, "Wow, I've never seen you do a non-human life form like this," and she's really impressed. And Admiral Layton makes a comment. She wonders about other changelings out there, like how many other changelings are out there flying around, and they get into a discussion about, well, I doubt they're imitating birds and so forth. And Admiral Layton makes a snarky comment about, other changelings aren't as limited as humans when it comes to mimicking humans. The quote is, they don't all share Odo's lack of skill when mimicking humans, which has always been stupid anyway. Odo should be just as good at mimicking humans as anything else. But once you know that this character is a changeling, it's just obvious. He's just digging Odo there.
Oh yeah.
And Odo seizes his arm and links with him, forcing the revelation that he is a changeling. And then he turns into a seagull and flies off.
Right. Oh, they're not flying around like birds. And then he flies off as a bird. I have to say, the first time I watched this, I found this confusing because later on in part 2, when we find out Layton is leading this coup, essentially this military coup, I thought, oh, it must be the changeling again. And it wasn't to the very end when it never turned out to be the changeling again. I remember thinking, so it kind of, I know why they put it in here. It's a misdirection in order to get us to think, okay, changelings are on Earth. They're sabotaging the power grid. That's what's really going on, until they reveal, no, the military is using the changeling threat as a excuse to have a military coup.
It's also a prover that there are changelings impersonating humans here. And so Ben Sisko's father, Joseph, could be a changeling.
Yes.
Right.
Because that's the thing they're driving towards. They actually start it really early, I noticed on this rewatch. Even before the blood tests get introduced, Sisko has been having conversations with his dad, and his dad is being dodgy and like not wanting to talk about his health and not wanting to submit to medical tests. And he later tells his dad, "I talked to your doctor. You haven't been to see him in 8 months." And there's even a moment early on when they're at the restaurant and they sit down. Sisko's going to have some gumbo, and he turns to his dad and says, "Are you going to have anything?" And his dad says, "I ate before you got here."
Little subtle things.
And Sisko gives him this suspicious eye, and so he's already thinking his dad may be a changeling that early in the episode. And then when they introduce the blood tests and so forth, it ramps up to his dad becomes unreasonable, and this is a violation of my civil rights and stuff like that. The one really good thing out of that is he lays out a way that a changeling could pass a blood test. Just get somebody else's blood and release it on demand. And so that's good. But his dad's still being an unreasonable old man.
Right to the point where he cuts himself, and then he criticizes Sisko for looking at the knife and looking at the blood on the knife. Like, how dare you? Well, I'm just looking at the knife. So, it's like, but it does show how, I mean, they're trying to demonstrate how paranoia, starts to ramp up when there could be an enemy among us, who could be anyone.
And having Leighton exposed as a changeling is a prover for that this is a real danger.
Right.
Yes, exactly. So I like how they kind of ramp up that paranoia, and that makes it seem reasonable at the end of this episode to declare martial law and to,
What they could have done is, instead of having the changeling be Leighton, it could have been Commander Benteen. And it would be like, see, they've even got someone. I'm at the top of the Federation, Starfleet, and even my own aide had been replaced by a changeling for a while, and that would have smoothed your difficulty, Dom, with it not being a changeling at the end of part 2.
Right. That would have been a little easier to figure out. Just to kind of close a loop on something, everybody in the regular cast got their moment in the sun so that they all get paid.
All get paid.
Everyone got paid this one. So Dax being a prankster and moving Odo's furniture for whatever reason. And then you got Bashir and O'Brien reenacting the Battle of Britain.
And it's not obvious because they play this scene not entirely, but largely straight. They're actually using dialogue from a Monty Python sketch. About cabbage crates coming over the briny and Clive, pranged his kite in the briny and stuff like that. That's actually from a Monty Python sketch.
I missed that one. I do like how Odo says Dax is the most humanoid person I know. It's almost like an insult. That was pretty good.
Especially since she's got a non-humanoid in her belly.
Yeah. Exactly. But we really get things going when we get the news that the terrorist has, a changeling terrorist has set off a bomb on Earth. The first time someone has committed a crime like this in over, 100 years. So we're to believe that Earth is this, paradise where no big crimes occur anyway.
Nothing's happened since that whale probe.
Yeah, exactly. I did have a note about the Battle of Britain thing, which is they're flying in the Battle of Britain. Their thoughts are with Earth, and Quark tries to sympathize with a story about the great monetary collapse of Ferenginar, and they mock him for it. And I'm like, no, where's your cultural appreciation? This is a different culture. This was a bad thing for them. Humans, all you care about are yourselves. And you know what? He's not wrong in this instance.
Yeah.
So,
I didn't think they were mocking him. It's just that Julian and Miles have just confessed that the reason they're doing this reenacting right now is because they're worried about Earth and they can't defend it for real. So they're doing reenacting as a way of processing those same emotions. and Quark tries to empathize with them and talks about the great monetary collapse. And O'Brien says, somehow that doesn't make me feel the least bit better. And I didn't take that as he's mocking Quark, as just, you just cited something that doesn't resonate with me at all.
I guess. Maybe it's a part of the whole, every time Quark brings up money and economics, the Superior Federation folks always just reject,
and that's fair
to do with it.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah.
One thing I noticed also in this, the holodeck scene, or them coming out of the holodeck and everything, is, Quark at one point refers to the Jerrys, the old slang about the Germans, at that point in World War II. Odo makes a comment when he sees them about them having done the Battle of Britain. So, two non-humans who know this much, clearly these guys are going into the holodeck frequently to play the Battle of Britain. And so others, have learned enough of the terminology to be able to converse with them about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I like
and they
that
even
aspect.
invite Odo to join their reenactor group and participate in it.
I'd forgotten about that.
Yep. I have to say that one of my favorite of the recurring characters, I really enjoy Joe Sisko.
Yes.
Ben Sisko's dad. I've always enjoyed when he shows up. This actor has previously been the commander of Starfleet in Star Trek 2 and 3, I guess.
Well, he was a traitor
4
there.
and 6.
Was it 6? Or
6 is, where he shot or was part of the plot to
Discovered Country.
Discovered Country. Yeah.
But he's back as Joe Sisko in this one, and I always enjoy him. He has definite opinions about replicated food. as a bit of a foodie myself, I like that. And I really like when it's revealed that he's got his restaurant in New Orleans. He's got a stuffed alligator hanging from the ceiling. And used to tell Jake when he was little that it's only in stasis, and then he lets it run around the restaurant at night. That is such a dad joke. I do like that. But I like him. I like his spunkiness. I mean, you could really see Sisko in him, the connection between them. And I've always liked Ben Sisko as a dad, but I also like him as a son in this, and I see his relationships, like family relationships. And I've always enjoyed that about this character, is those family relationships.
There's a great moment. My favorite moment in the dialogue in this episode involves both of them, because after the blood tests have been introduced, they get word that there's a problem at the restaurant, and I think they actually say that Grandpa has been arrested.
Yeah.
But Ben beams back, and there are two. Oops. Hang on. There are two, very nice, very polite, very deferential young Starfleet officers there to administer the blood test. And they have an argument, or Joseph has an argument with Ben about the blood tests. And it ends with Joseph, or at one point in the discussion, Joseph says, "I don't want to hear about it. You take these two vampires and tell them to either sit down and grab a menu or get out of my restaurant." And Sisko says, "Jake, get them a menu." And one of the young deferential Starfleet officers, he just wants to back out of the situation. He doesn't really want to eat here. He says, "But sir," and Sisko says, "I would recommend the shrimp Creole." It's like, you are going to sit down and pretend to eat until I get this sorted out with my dad, is the message.
That was good. I like that. I like Sisko's assertion of his authority there.
Yes.
And then, we have this civil rights back and forth, which I appreciate. I think there's good arguments on both sides. And it only really ends when not only does Sisko see the blood on the knife, but the dad has an episode, a medical episode of some
He has
sort.
a stroke.
Yeah. But thankfully, strokes in the 24th century are not nearly as bad as they are today, and he's fine not long afterward. So that's good. Apparently, Nog is frequenting Sisko's restaurant
where they feed him tube grubs, and they're even going to introduce tube grubs on the menu. They've just got to cook them for the humans.
Tube grubs just sounds terrible. But Nog is interesting here because Nog has always been, I don't know, impatient in a sense. He's literally his first few months at the academy, it just arrived, and thinks that he should be friends with everyone and should be in the elite, group of cadets who are probably all seniors or juniors and seniors anyway. He really he feels like, of course I should be in that group. I'm Nog. That this idea that why should anyone prevent him? And even to the point he does have the grades apparently after 2 months. I'm not sure how, but okay. He just needs a senior officer to sponsor him. And I love how Sisko is like, I've got bigger things to worry about. I don't like the fact that you've cornered me on this yet again. Nog has a way of cornering Sisko. And it's like, fine. Oh, okay, whatever. Now get out of my office. I'll think about it. But it's this interesting, like, Nog
shows his background. He's a Ferengi negotiator. He knows how to get what he wants.
Exactly. I find Nog is in the first few seasons, Nog is just an annoying kid who's always getting into trouble. But, as we went on, Nog became this interesting character in his own right. And gets even more interesting as we go on, of course, as he goes into war. So I really appreciate this evolution of Nog, and we're seeing he's in the midst of this transition in this set of episodes. So I really like that. So we have another scene. We meet the president of the Federation, in Jarish
Inyo.
Yeah. And they demonstrate to him how vulnerable he actually is to changeling by, Sisko showing up in the office with a briefcase. He takes the tricorder out, or whatever it is, a device, and or I think it's a pad, and then the briefcase turns into Odo, which so it's like stuck inside of Odo. So.
Yeah, convincing demonstration that your security protocols are way too lax for the current environment.
Right, and the president's reaction to, like, he doesn't want the increased security. It's just one level up. We're going to increase security at Federation government buildings and Starfleet installations, but he's like, I don't want to be remembered as the president who destroyed paradise, meaning Earth in its current state.
Well, the best way to do that is not protect paradise and let it get destroyed.
Right. Yeah, it's an odd. It's odd. Like, I get what they're trying to set up. I just thought it was, an odd way of phrasing it.
Yeah. This part of this two-parter reminds me a lot of Ron Moore's Battlestar Galactica.
Yep.
Because in this pair of episodes, you have this paradisical Earth that is chronically underprepared to deal with a major threat and does not realize how serious the threat is. And then over in Battlestar Galactica, you have, like Caprica. It's this paradisical world that is chronically underprepared to deal with the Cylon threat and does not realize how dangerous the Cylon threat is. And they basically get wiped out. And even though Ron Moore himself is from the liberal end of the political spectrum, he, had the integrity to write a series where you're basically watching a bunch of pampered liberals getting mugged by reality one episode after another. Right. And they have to progressively start adopting more and more realistic proposals for their society, like the President Laura Roslin early on, and she's like the Secretary of Education. She's kind of she's clearly meant to be liberal. They patterned the president she worked under after Bill Clinton. But she is the one who identifies early on in the series, we have to get out there and start having babies.
Right.
And it's her who finally passes even though she makes an exception, who passes the abortion ban in order to keep humanity alive.
Right.
And so you watched these people coming from a very pampered society that could indulge liberal policies have to come up, have to reacquaint themselves with the brutal facts of life and adopt more sensible policies. When you're resource poor, including other humans and being a resource, you have to cultivate those resources in a way that you don't have to otherwise. And this pair of episodes is playing with the same kind of dynamic of you have these people who grew up in paradise where they're in a post-scarcity environment. They don't think in turn, and nobody does anything bad. It's like on the Enterprise at the end of season 1 of Next Gen, they don't think to have monitoring protocols on who gets to use the comm system. So the corpsicles they thaw out can just call anybody at any time using the comm system, right, because nobody would abuse using the comm system. And here, you can have people walk into the president of the Federation's office without passing a security screening.
Right. Or at least a sufficient security screening.
Yeah.
You know, earlier you talked to the comparison between Babylon 5 and DS9, and it's interesting that comparison to Battlestar Galactica, where you have an enemy who can pass as human and walk among us and, you know, cause havoc and sabotage. As a comparison, it's interesting how he took those thoughts. You know, Ron Moore took those thoughts with him into Battlestar Galactica. This one, of course, was written not by Ron Moore, but Ira Bear and Robert Wolf, the two of the producers. So this was a major effort. You know, this was the top guys doing things. So,
well, I mean, it's good with that Ron Moore, you know, carried those thoughts with him, because it's always important to know what you want. So what do you want, Dom?
What do I want? Okay, where are we going?
What do you want?
Where are you going with this?
Yeah, but just what do you want?
I want to keep talking about Star Trek.
Yeah, but what do you want?
Okay, what do we? I don't know what you're doing here.
I'm doing Mr. Morden from Babylon 5.
Oh, right.
What do you want is the question the Shadows ask.
Yes. Okay.
Who are you is the question the Vorlons ask.
I knew it was. Yes, I knew it was familiar, but I didn't know where we were going.
And the trick is when you answer those questions, no answer you give is ever enough. You can always dig deeper.
Right. So to wrap up this story, as you mentioned, Jimmy, everything is just building up to the power outage at the end. You know, everything goes out. And
I like the way actually, I don't like the way they explain it. They explain that the terrorists who brought down the power system infected the power relay system with some kind of self-replicating computer protocol. You know, and it's like, this is 1996. You didn't have the word virus?
We had the word virus.
Of course you did. I mean, you don't trust the audience to know the word virus? And they should have also alluded to it somehow got around our antivirus software.
Right, exactly. And I think it's funny, you know, for all of Jerish Inyo's statement about paradise earlier, apparently Earth is one power outage away from savagery. You know, that like they're afraid, you know, we're this is it, you know, we're all people are going to start attacking each other. We need to get, you know, reassurances out there and put soldiers in the streets to reassure people. So it's kind of human nature is human nature, and so I could believe it actually that a power outage in this paradisiacal society would freak people out to the point of, you know, although there are no independent power systems like.
It was very inconvenient.
Yeah.
But like Mr. Scott says, the more they trick out the plumbing, the easier it is to plug up the drain.
Right. Yeah, it is. Yeah.
It's hard to think they wouldn't have, you know, even if they had an interlinked power system with a single critical failure point, they wouldn't have battery backups.
Well, everything would be independently powered, I would think. I mean, it's just like, yeah. It's that part was a little hard to swallow, but we need to, you know, knock the power grid out for the sake of the plot. So we did. And it's interesting that, you know, Leighton, this relationship between Leighton and Sisko, you know, Sisko was Leighton's executive officer previously, when Leighton was a captain, and he's the one who got Sisko to be commander of Deep Space Nine. So there's this close relationship, and so Leighton clearly had this idea that Sisko and Odo have such credibility that they must be key to me carrying out my plot. Like he doesn't convince them of the rightness of his cause ahead of time. He doesn't bring them inside the circle of the plot, but they're clearly he sees them as very useful, very important to carrying out this plot. Otherwise, why bother bringing them in? I mean, you could have, apart from Odo, you don't really need Sisko to do everything that Leighton does.
Well, having Sisko there would be. I mean, he wants to make Sisko head of Earth security, and he trusts, based on their previous relationship, that as head of Earth security, Sisko will have a viewpoint similar to his and help him advance what he wants to do once he's head of security. So Sisko does play a role in the plan.
Right. Yeah.
And he can count on him, as he does, being an additional voice who understands the changelings and can help convince Jerushinyo of the threat they pose. So it's not like if you brought Odo here, Odo could be overselling things. Oh, my people are a super threat. You better, take extreme measures. But he's a changeling. He doesn't have an objective perspective on the threat of his own people. Whereas Sisko, as an Earth officer who has worked, a high-ranking Earth officer who has worked with changelings a lot, can testify objectively, yes, they are a major threat.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that part is effective. I think using Sisko in this way, helps the plot, the coup plot, but doesn't compromise Sisko as a character in that sense. So I think there's that benefit of it as well. Father, any other notes on this one?
Yeah, a few little things. Some interesting continuity. Both looking back and looking forward. We see the Federation President's office in Paris, just as it was in Star Trek VI, The Undiscovered Country. Looking forward, we have this conversation before Odo leaves the station where O'Brien asks him to check in on his parents in Dublin. And then Odo turns to Bashir and says, should I check on anyone for you? And Bashir, I was like, no one to visit for me. And of course, we're going to learn later about Bashir's genetic engineering and everything. And Bashir didn't want Odo going anywhere near his family because he didn't want Odo to start asking the wrong questions and discovering, about Bashir's genetic engineering. So this is a small, subtle thing they put in there. Probably knowing what they were going to do later with Bashir's background.
I suspect they didn't know they were going to do it, but it sure sets it up really well.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe they didn't. Maybe they had some idea that we're going to do something weird with his family, but or I don't know. Yeah. But the other thing I was thinking about was, this aired in January of ~96, so we've already had, in the real world, we've already had the Oklahoma City bombing, but not yet had the 9/11 attacks. And what would this episode have been? Would it have been different if it would have come after 9/11 and some of the questions around security versus civil rights that become a much bigger, discussion in the world at that point. So,
and I think Enterprise ends up taking those up. In season 3, I think it was.
Yeah.
Before I ask you for your final thoughts, Jimmy, there were two other things I wanted to mention. In the credits, Joseph Sisko was listed in quotation marks, and in quotation marks, and no other characters were. And that's almost always when it's not really that person. And so I think they were trying to mislead us in that, that whole, the whole, whether he's actually a changeling or not. So I think that was another attempt to mislead. The other thing is, I forgot to mention about Nog and his attitude at the Academy reminds me a lot of Dal in Prodigy, who was thought, very highly of himself, thought he should have been much more advanced than he was, and was a real outsider among everyone. So I thought that was another interesting aspect that I forgot to mention. So Jimmy, do you have any other final notes?
Yeah, well, so General Haig brought Captain Sisko or Captain Sheridan into his plot before he recommended him for command on Babylon 5. So, pro tip, you want to make sure your people before you put them in positions of authority. Also, there's a moment early on where I think there's a hint that they don't pay off, but I still think it's there. When Odo is looking for Jadzia, he comes to Quark's bar and Quark says, well, she's not here. Is there anything else I can do for you? And he explains that Jadzia has moved all of his furniture like 3 centimeters to the left or 1 centimeter to the right, and it's driving him nuts. And at the end of that scene, after talking about whether that's rational or not, at the end of that scene, Odo gets a call and he's going to go to a senior officers meeting in command and control, and Jadzia will be there. And as he's leaving, Quark says, hey, when you get there, say hi to Jadzia for me. And I took that as Odo is somehow complicit in the moving of his furniture. Quark is somehow complicit in the moving of Odo's furniture.
I did too.
Yeah, I think you're right. Yeah,
or at least wants Odo to wonder if he was.
Yeah.
Excellent. All right. So I did say we have some feedback, and this feedback is coming from our recent discussion of the original series episode, Operation Annihilate. Emily sent in this email, very extensive email, so let me read it here. I completely agree that the episode has some major problems. Kirk's oddly detached relationship with his brother and family, the clunky scenes and strange dialogue here and there, the artificial time limits, the questionable medical and scientific practices, etc. The concept is pretty horrific, and listening to the podcast made me grateful that as a kid I'd read and reread the Monsters of Star Trek book by Daniel Cohen so often before finally watching it. I suspect that by the time I saw it, I was completely numb to the concept. I also realized how much of the episode I have to endure in order to get to the scenes I like. I think the main reason I loved it, the episode, was because it gave us so much about Spock, and I was one of those kids who couldn't get enough of anything Spock. I love how it takes 5 adult humans trained in combat and a tranquilizer to subdue him on the bridge.
And that was probably an extra strength Vulcan tranquilizer, too.
Exactly. The scene when he sort of nonchalantly studies the restraining straps holding him down in sickbay, then breaks out of them in seconds, is very Frankenstein-esque, especially since you don't know if he's in control of his actions yet. As a kid, I thought the tension and jerky motion that Nimoy uses here and there, as if he's trying to throw off the pain, was great, as well as the fact that aside from the moment after he stops the people from attacking him on the planet, he seems to be adjusting to it little by little. I also figured he was flat out lying when he said Vulcans can control pain. I always thought as a kid that he meant that they were just good at not reacting to it, and since he's constantly fighting with his human side, I sometimes wondered if he might actually be functioning as well as, if not better, than a true Vulcan might in that situation. The inner eyelid was too convenient and is never mentioned again, but it was a nice alien quirk that made you wonder just how hot and desert-like his planet might be. I can't recall if this one came before or after Amok Time. Before. Or any other visuals of Vulcan, but that was kind of cool. And yes, McCoy was totally incompetent, and full points to Nurse Chapel, who probably should have taken over from the beginning. All in all, not a great episode when taken as a whole, but coming from a kid who'd read about the fried egg creature so often, it was old hat by the time I watched it. A show that seemed to be mostly about Spock was naturally booted to the top of my list. Listening to the podcast did make me glad I had the Monsters book as a kid, though. I think if I'd seen it with no advanced preparation, the ick factor would have dropped it down quite a bit. I'm really glad they didn't use the other proposed ending of destroying everyone on the planet. That would have been way too horrific and definitely a huge downer.
What I like about this feedback is that it shows the different ways that people appreciate or don't individual episodes because of her background with this book.
Yeah.
Before she ever saw the episode, she reacted to it in an emotionally different way than me as a little kid watching these fried egg pain-inducing things. And so for me, the ick factor was much higher. Yeah. And I like the fact that different people can have different reactions based on, what they've been exposed to and how that affects their evaluation of an episode. And I'm glad that she enjoyed it.
Now, the inner eyelid thing, did that come up in the Corbomite maneuver? Was it no, not the Corbomite maneuver. Which was the Tholian web when Spock had to look at the Tholian and went in, would have gone insane, but was
that's the episode with the Medusan ambassador, not the Tholian web.
Right. And I thought there was something about an inner eyelid protecting him or something, but maybe not.
I don't think so. They might have mentioned it there, but I'd have to go back and check the transcript to see.
Yeah. But I agree on the ick factor of this. As a kid, I thought these flying eggs were.
These are the most horrific monsters in original series Star Trek.
That and the salt vampire gave me nightmares as a kid. All right, and we had another piece of feedback.
I just love, though, with the salt vampire when Spock is slapping her around. Could Nancy withstand this? It just looks so ridiculous.
That was pretty funny. We also got feedback from MS1963 is Go on YouTube, who writes, a pulpy episode with plenty of melodrama and an exclamation point. As a kid, I liked all the phaser fire and the location filming, but the tortured screaming really disturbed me. I also found Kirk's family dynamic alien. Oh yes, I distinctly remember recognizing the fried egg parasites for what they were. Rubber joke shop vomit. Remember joke shops? The internet age put that one to rest. As for McCoy, I cut him some slack after the whole Edith Keeler incident and a belly full of cordrazine. Maybe he was hitting the Romulan ale too hard and thought Spock had made up the whole thing about the pacifist movement. Thanks for the episode. So, yeah, joke shops.
We didn't have joke shops here in the Ozarks when I was growing up, but I'm familiar with the concept. I guess it's basically like magic shops.
Yeah, essentially. Yeah. You had all kinds of weird, goofy.
I did see fake vomit, though. That was something we had in the Ozarks when I was growing up.
Yeah, fake dog poo.
Yeah.
Being a little boy back in the 70s and 80s, that was quite a time. Thank you, everyone, for your feedback. We do appreciate that. And now we'd like to take a moment to thank our patrons who make it possible for us to create The Secrets of Star Trek, including Andy F., Andrew P., David H., Jordan B., and Robert R. Their generous donations at sqpn.com/give make it possible for us to continue The Secrets of Star Trek and all the shows at StarQuest. And you can join them by visiting sqpn.com/give. So that's it from us. We would love to know what you thought of Homefront, this Deep Space Nine episode. You can let us know by commenting on the show at sqpn.com/trek, our Facebook page at facebook.com/StarQuestMedia, send an email to trek@sqpn.com, visit our Discord community at sqpn.com/discord, or watch The Secrets of Star Trek on our YouTube channel at youtube.com/StarQuestMedia and leave us a comment there. We'll be back next time when we'll be discussing the second part of this two-part series of episodes called Paradise Lost. Until then, Jimmy Yakin, thank you for joining me and sharing The Secrets of Star Trek.
Thank you, and live long and prosper.
And Father Jason Tyler, thank you as well.
Thanks, Dom.
And once again, I'm Dom Bettinelli. Thank you for listening to The Secrets of Star Trek on StarQuest. And remember, I'm not sleeping. I'm checking my eyelids for holes.